Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
I'm Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is Farage at Large, live from Norwich. Please welcome your host, Nigel Farage.
Yes, good evening. It's Farage at Large in Norfolk. We're in Norwich. We're going to talk about Tory sleaze. We're going to talk about coastal erosion. We've got some great guests here tonight. We've got Duncan Baker, Member of Parliament from North Norfolk for the Conservative Party. Dan Hurd, coxswain of the Hemsby Lifeboat, and Stuart Agnew, retired farmer and politician and schoolmate of King Charles. But all of that comes after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. Efforts to weed out hundreds of potentially corrupt police officers from Britain's biggest force are underway. Counter-terrorism officers, along with those who tackle serious organised crime, have been drafted in to help clean up the Metropolitan Police Force. Of more than 1,000 cases, nearly 700 will be reassessed, with 200 referred to formal risk management or vetting. Former senior investigating officer at the Met, Simon Harding, says vetting should be an absolute priority.
Taken away that kind of process of vetting, which helped identify people at a very early stage. Yes, people would get through. When you cross over from force to force, because you're already sort of branded, if you like, a police officer, the vetting levels aren't necessarily as high as they would be. So, and that can cause a problem. But the intelligence that comes with that person should follow them, obviously, and you should be able to see that. But, you know, I still think there's, and I think everyone does, the level of vetting needs to be much, much stronger.
Police in Northern Ireland are warning their officers could be targeted by dissidents in Londonderry on Easter Monday. That's after MI5 raised the terrorism threat level in the country to severe following the shooting of senior detective John Caldwell. Assistant Chief Constable Bobby Singleton says the service has received strong intelligence that attacks are being planned.
Our police officers and some police staff had already been subject to leave restrictions for this period in anticipation of what might have happened. But again, given the severe terrorist threat, we've seen the necessity, if you like, to move to that 12-hour shift pattern to maximise the number of officers that we have operationally available to provide a safe operating environment, not only for our policing operations, but of course by extension to maintain the safety and security of members of the public as well.
A man who murdered his pregnant wife by pushing her off the edge of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh has been jailed for 20 years. CCTV images have been released showing Kashif Anwar and Fawziyah Javed walking behind him. The 29-year-old pushed his wife, who was 17 weeks pregnant, down the hill. She fell 50 feet and sustained multiple blunt force injuries. But before dying, she managed to tell a nearby woman that her husband had been behind the attack. There's been more violence on the streets of Paris today as protesters continue to demonstrate against the proposed pension bill. They set fire to one of President Emmanuel Macron's favourite restaurants and clashed with riot police. There have been pockets of violence since January, but the protests have been mostly, so far, peaceful. And finally, the King has signalled his support for research into the British monarchy's historical links with transatlantic slavery. Meanwhile, King Charles and the Queen Consort have been at a Maundy Thursday service in York today, where the monarch presented specially minted coins to local people, thanking them for their outstanding Christian service. And the royals were greeted by well-wishers in York, but as well as a handful of demonstrators too, holding banners reading, "Not my King." You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time to go back to Norfolk for Farage at Large.
Yes, we're here in Norwich tonight at the absolute heart of Norfolk for another Farage at Large. As ever, we will talk about local issues that have a national impact. Now, we'd very much hoped that the Member of Parliament for this constituency, Clive Lewis, Labour MP, Corbynite, and we invited Clive to come, and actually we got a very polite reply, genuinely. He said, "I'm currently away, arriving back the wrong time. Otherwise, I would have been tempted." Well, we are GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're not afraid to hear political opinions from anybody. That's what makes us different to the BBC and Sky. And Clive Lewis, at any point in the future, you are welcome to come. But we didn't need to go far to find a Member of Parliament that did want to appear on the show. And I'm very pleased that Duncan Baker, the Conservative Member of Parliament for North Norfolk, joins us this evening. Now, we have a bit of history. I knew your father very well, who was a UKIP fanatic and got elected as a district councillor in Norfolk and a county councillor. And you, of course, followed in his stead.
Yeah.
And were elected as a UKIP member.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. No. Yeah. Stood in 2015.
You stood for UKIP,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
OK. Having had a UKIP background, did that make it difficult for the Conservatives in Norfolk to accept you?
No, not in the slightest, because when I went for my selection meeting, they said, prove it to us, prove it that you are a Brexiteer. I said, I don't need to prove anything. I used to stand for the United Kingdom Independence Party, and I believe in getting our country back. They let me straight in, so it wasn't a problem at all.
Good, well, and you there you are. Now, you're very, very fortunate. You know, you're born and bred in North Norfolk, and it is one of the most beautiful, magical, mystical parts of the entire United Kingdom. Those amazing salt marshes and those little towns, you know, of Cley and Blakeney and your own hometown of... It's a magnificent place, but there's a problem, isn't there? You know, Burnham Market's rather nice. There's a problem that North Norfolk is so attractive and so nice, and I wasn't going to talk about the roads preceding Easter, which weren't too great today, but the problem is it's so attractive that big money from London has absolutely poured into North Norfolk and many other parts of Norfolk, and it's got one of the highest rates in the country of unoccupied houses.
Yeah.
The people are so wealthy, they can buy a house, they don't need to let it, they might only use it 3 weeks a year, and that really makes it tough, doesn't it, for local people?
Well, it's been turbocharged by the pandemic as well. So people decided to then buy a second home in North Norfolk. You're right, we are the second highest number of second homes in the entire country, only second to Westminster in central London. And, you know, to have a homegrown MP, you know, I grew up and was born and bred, as you said, in North Norfolk, it's quite rare. You've seen this problem get worse and worse and worse. And that wealth has changed. Over 20 years ago, it started in Burnham Market. It's moved all the way around my coast. I have 52 miles of coast going from Holcombe all the way down to Horsey. And it's got worse and worse. And that's why the government has said, look, you know, we're not socialists. We do believe in the fact that people, if they earn their own money, should be able to buy the property or assets that they want to. But sometimes you have to intervene in the market where it gets completely out of control. It's got out of control in many coastal villages in North Norfolk. The same in Devon and Cornwall, which everyone always talks about.
So what are you actually going to do?
Well, we're going to double council tax on the homes that are not used. I don't think that's going to be the golden bullet that solves absolutely everything. But it will do certain things. It will ensure that actually that council tax, which might raise £8.2 million in North Norfolk, goes back into the local economy. Hopefully it can develop affordable local houses for people. You know, it could help fund CLTs, that sort of infrastructure. But take things like bus routes, shops, and every new build house in Blakeney that is built goes for £1 million. Local people can't buy those. Local people can't afford to rent in that area.
No, it's very difficult.
So there are many problems.
And the trouble is, you know, if you're earning a fortune working for Goldman Sachs, like sort of Rishi Sunak or someone like that, then a doubling of council tax won't matter. Talking of money and sleaze and corruption, back in the 1990s, those last couple of years, in fact, to be honest, the last 5 years of John Major's government were mired with cash for questions, his back to basics, family values campaign. That didn't work out terribly well. And I think, you know, I mean, here you are, Duncan, you become a PPS, you know, it's your first step on the ministerial rung, and you resigned as a matter of principle over the Pincher, the appropriately named Pincher affair. And, you know, you were pretty clear in what you said at the time. You said the breakdown in trust is alarmingly and abundantly clear. Since then, we've had Kwasi Kwarteng, Matt Hancock. I thought I'd get a bigger boo than that, but never mind. And Sir Graham Brady, all being suckered in to saying they would take money to do work for a firm that didn't even exist. And I thought our MPs are supposed to be clever. We've had the lockdown files, which show parts of government behaved disgustingly. You know, trying to frighten the pants off us, trying to make us quarantine for 14 days when the medical experts said 5 to 7 was enough. Calling me a pub hooligan. I mean, there's almost no limit to these people. We've had Nadeem Zahawi, briefly the Chancellor, quite seriously underpaying taxes. Partygate. We're in a farming area, of course, here. Neil Parish, I bet he's very popular up here. Looking at his farmer tractor sites. I mean, it just goes on. And now we've got Scott Benton, you know, openly saying that he'd be prepared for money to leak the contents of a white paper to a gambling group, market-sensitive information, which if he'd done it would have been a criminal offence. Oh, and to top the lot, we read last Sunday in the Mail on Sunday that a senior member of Parliament was called at 4 a.m. by another MP who said, this is at 4 a.m, nameless MP, but don't worry, you're not a suspect, it's going to be OK. I'm in a brothel, I don't know how I got here, and I can't find my clothes. That seat you won had been held by Sir Norman Lamb, a very assiduous and a very good local member of Parliament. Yep. I think many people in North Norfolk would always say that. 18 years the Lib Dems had it. You won it, and you won it well, one of the biggest swings in the country. But when you see what your party is doing on the national stage, do you believe you can hold it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, first of all, let's just clear up. My wife will be watching. It wasn't me calling from the other way. But yeah, look, I mean, I think I had the biggest majority in North Norfolk in 32 years after Sir Norman stepped down. And he was a very decent individual, and I've always said that. It's an interesting time at the moment. It's been an incredibly difficult time.
It's scandalous.
The local homegrown potatoes like myself, Nigel, you know where I came from, you know my stepfather well, have gone into this new life. Actually, we look at some of these things that go on. People like myself, we just want to represent our communities that we grew up in and serve our constituents and do not want to get embroiled in this behaviour.
No. Duncan, I believe you. What I'm saying is this is doing, even someone like you, as a local lad, potentially great harm, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is. But look, I mean, take the situation that occurred last night that broke in the papers of Scott Benton. I am glad that immediately the whip has been taken away from him. There's going to be an investigation.
Wasn't that immediate?
Absolutely. Let's make sure that these things are investigated properly and there's swift behaviour.
I suspect there'll be more of them. Final thought. Great big barge is going into Portland Dock. Local MP Richard Drax is absolutely spitting feathers. But it's necessary because we need to put 500 young men, undocumented young men, somewhere. And yet, yesterday, 437 crossed the channel, 201 crossed the day before. Duncan Baker, where are you going to get the rest of the barges from? You're going to need a barge every day at this rate.
Well, look, take the positives that have been coming out in those numbers.
For this.
If you look at the return agreement that's been put in place, the last quarter, last year, the actual numbers of Albanians has completely and utterly dropped off the edge of a cliff. We've had 500 returned, about 2,000 people returned since that's been going in place. The numbers out today show a 2.6% drop in the numbers of people crossing over the English Channel. Of course we want this sorted out, Nigel.
We've had the worst
There's
march.
been an improvement.
We've had the worst march for decades. I promise you, I've seen the forecast
but
for
the
this
3 months
weekend.
that you've just taken,
and they'll come.
The numbers have fallen over the 3 months.
How many will come this year?
Well, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't want it to be
50,000,
56,000, and that's why we're taking the action we have.
What Albania proves, if you're able to deport people, you stop people coming.
Correct.
If you sent large numbers to Albania, people would stop paying the criminal traffickers. In a word, should we leave the ECHR to be free to do that?
I think if it becomes absolutely necessary that we cannot protect our borders in a sovereign country, then absolutely nothing is off the table, and we have to consider that.
Well, the sooner it's on the table, in my view, the better. But Duncan Baker, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening on GB News. In a moment, we'll talk coastal erosion. Big issue in this county, and we are, after all, an island.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I sometimes think we forget that we're an island. And coastal erosion has on this east coast of England been an issue for a very, very long time. Indeed, the village of Dunwich, just down the road in Suffolk, actually was being represented by a member of Parliament up until 1832, despite the fact it was a mile and a half out in the North Sea. So we have seen coastal erosion before. We've seen flooding before. The great floods of 1953, 100 people in Norfolk died in those floods. 300 died between here and the Thames estuary, and across in the Netherlands, 3,000 died. They decided they would start to take coastal defences very, very seriously indeed. We took them seriously in certain places. But today, we have an Environment Agency policy here in Norfolk. And I have to say, I think that the policy of managed realignment, that's what they call it, it basically means surrender. It means we're not going to do anything to try and slow the pace of coastal erosion. Whereas across in the Netherlands, they built these massive sea defences, and now, with a thing called sand nourishment, they pour millions of cubic tons of sand on their beaches to protect them. And the place that's been in the news in a really big way over the course of the last couple of months is Hemsby on this Norfolk coast. Beautiful sandy beach, lovely place, people losing their homes. Are we adopting the right policy? Well, one man who's been right at the centre of this storm is Dan Hurd, coxswain of the Hemsby lifeboat. Your lifeboat, you're not part of the RNLI, are you? You're an independent lifeboat.
No, nearly 50 years we've been independent due to drownings off Winterton. The local village started up a lifeboat and it's moved on since.
And you are an emergency service, which is why you've actually been used in helping people, haven't you? Rescuing people, evacuating people from houses. How bad's it been?
It's horrific. If you were down there now today, and like I said this morning, I had a lady come up to me, she's got a property right on the edge, crying. You know, we feel hopeless. If I had £20 million, I'll put that £20 million on that beach to protect her. It's just devastating.
Clearly, the Environment Agency and the government are rattled by this, because it isn't just people losing their houses at Hemsby. They're talking about closing the beach for the whole of the summer.
Yeah, well, we're lucky enough the beach is now back open by the contractors, done a fantastic job bringing this rock berm in.
So we're now at last bringing some rock in?
Yeah, so the rock finished last week. The Environment Agency declared an emergency. Prior to that, we were told there was no rock within the country. They got 2,000 tonne within 2 hours from Hopton, which is just up the coast. It's absolutely ludicrous that they declare an emergency and they can get this rock granite within the matter of 2 hours. There's people losing homes. We've got the Hemsby open now for the summer season. That's affecting businesses. There's people cancelling holidays.
Well, yeah, I was talking about second homes earlier, but actually, I mean, Norfolk is a big destination, isn't it? People come and they, you know, Airbnb it, they stay in hotels if they're not filled up with other people. They... Well... I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that. You know, the campsites in Norfolk. I mean, these beaches are important in terms of, I mean, for Hemsby, tourism matters, doesn't it?
Well, when you look at it, Hemsby brings in £88 million a year. And, yeah, we've had meetings and they're looking at asking local businesses to contribute towards a rock berm on the beach. Well, to me, they've paid their taxes, they've paid business rates. What is our government doing? You know, they need to sit up and realise with the Environment Agency, these coastlines need protecting. You know, we can fund illegal immigration. I've said we might as well shut the buildings down, house illegal immigrants in the buildings. We're guaranteed £1 million a year per building, and that money can be put into the shoreline. That's just the way we feel at the moment.
You feel that's a real counsel of despair, but that's...
Yeah, I do, but there's money being wasted everywhere by this government, and it's just, yeah.
So, well... So, Dan, because of the emergency, we've put some big granite blocks on the beach, but is that actually enough?
Well, not really. They've just put a plaster over it. The bad publicity they've got, they thought they'd better do something.
Yeah.
We need some fishtail groins put out to bead these unhealthy beach levels up with sand, which will collect the sand, and get this rock berm put through as soon as possible. We ain't got a matter of, I would say another 2 years, we're going to lose a lot.
Well, look, Dan, I want to say thank you for coming in and explaining the grief of people in Hemsby in particular. And I have to say, when you compare our attitude towards this East Coast coastal erosion with the Netherlands, I think what's happening here is pretty shameful, driven by all sorts of environmentalists who think big floodplains will be marvellous, but they'll be uninhabitable. But also, on behalf of me, and the rest of the crowd here and our view.
But if you look at Holland as a whole, they're below sea level.
I know.
How they can protect that?
No, we could if we wanted to. It's about priorities. Well done for what you and the guys do.
Can I just add, we've got some people to the south of the gap where the roads collapse, there's no vehicle access, the government are doing nothing about that. There's no emergency powers been brought in to give them vehicle access, they're elderly. It's heartbreaking for them.
No, look.
But thank
We're
you.
with you, we agree with you, and we admire you. You're a brave lad. Thank you.
Thank you.
In a moment, we will have Barrage to Barrage from the residents of Norwich. We'll see what they've got for me in just a minute.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
In Norwich, and it's time for them to direct their questions to me. I've no idea what they're going to ask. All I know are their names. And I know the first name is Anne. Good evening.
Hello, Nigel. Do you think the new detention barges will work or just another gimmick by the government?
They're getting desperate. The last FOI I saw back said 452 hotels were full. They're running out of hotels. The public are realising that at a cost of 150 quid a night, for each of these young men, it's a very, very expensive game, maybe 6 million quid a day for the hotels, let alone the private accommodation and everything else. So the barge is a cheaper solution. The barge, they say, will cost 20 grand a day. I suspect actually it'll cost more, probably nearer 50 grand a day, to be honest. But look, I made the point earlier. You know, this barge is going in. 437 people came in yesterday. The barge takes 500. We were up at Scampton last week. RAF Scampton, the home of the Dam Busters, where there should be a museum to that incredible 617 squadron and those amazing people, despite their massive losses, the things they achieved. I thought we could win that campaign, and we've lost. And I'm afraid, you know, it's all well and good for Duncan to say, well, we have sent back some Albanians. True. But nobody else has been sent back anywhere. So I think, and if I'm being honest with you, I think by September of this year, we are going to be completely and utterly overwhelmed.
Yeah, I agree.
Hayden.
Should the government be doing more with our British overseas territories?
It's a really interesting one. Our membership of the European Union made our relationship with the British overseas territories very, very difficult. We were forced to put onto those territories, for example, financial market regulation, because the French insisted that we did it, making life quite difficult for some of them. I think, you know, there are these amazing parts of the world, you know, far-flung, some in the West Indies and elsewhere, and of course closer to home we have our relationship with the Channel Islands, the Isle of Man, and Brexit is the opportunity to forge a closer relationship, not just with the British overseas territories, not just with places that still fly the Union flag, but actually more broadly with the Commonwealth. Yeah. I mean, you know, there are 2.5 billion people living in the Commonwealth. They speak our language, we share common law, we're shared history. We've had some good times and some very bad times together. Amazing to think. 40% of our entire contribution in World War I and World War II came from what are now Commonwealth countries, and they were all volunteers. So, yes, I think more could be done. And look, you know, I mean, I don't want to rehash the Brexit argument. We want to be friendly with our next-door neighbours. And we know that's impossible with the French, but we want to try. Well, they're rioting in Paris tonight. Goodness me. Well. I mean, they've just set fire to President Macron's favourite restaurant. Oh, dear. This lot. I mean, I'm not encouraging them, folks at home. I'm really not. Hayden, what's your view of our place in the world?
Well, I love the Commonwealth. I was born in Australia. I'm half New Zealander. I came to this country a decade ago. My father's English. So I love the Commonwealth. I want to do more with it. I want to do Kansas. And we should do more with all of our Commonwealth family, be them independent countries, republics, or our own territories like Gibraltar and the Falklands.
I absolutely agree with you. And just quickly, with your Australian background,
yes.
Who's going to win the Ashes this summer?
Come on, England.
Right, I think we can quite safely say that Hayden is now fully naturalised as a Brit. It's Ruth, good evening.
Hello, Nigel. I just wondered what your thoughts are regarding the ditching of the annual St George's Day dinner at Magdalen College in Oxford to be replaced by celebration of Eid.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating? I mean, I was going up Regent Street a couple of days ago, and there are, you know, we got some sort of decorations up celebrating Ramadan. Well, fine, but when I go up Oxford Street on the 23rd of April, you know, will Mayor Khan have made sure that we have a celebration of all things English? Not a blooming chance. And this is so wrong. We have been... If you're a Scottish nationalist, that's fantastic. You're a Welsh nationalist, you know, well, maybe they burnt a few colleges, but that's fine. You're an Irish nationalist, and goodness knows what was done by some people, mercifully a minority, in the aim of Irish nationalism. That's great. Anything English is sneered at, looked down upon, frowned upon. And you know what I've got to say to all those people in mainstream media and the Linekers of this world and there we are, bigger boo than Matt Hancock. And all of these people is the hell with you. We can be proud of our Englishness and our identity and our history and our traditions. And I'm afraid Magdalen College, I'm afraid all of these colleges are frankly becoming madrasas of Marxism. That is what they are. And we should think about... And we should think, I believe, significant amounts of public money go into our universities, and we should have somebody going around those universities making sure we're teaching critical thinking and objectivity and not political indoctrination. How upset by it, Ruth, are you?
I just feel that in a lot of ways Britons are becoming quite supine about not actually doing something to say, actually, here we are. You know, hanging English flags, national flags, and that sort of thing. I think people are becoming a bit weary and just not standing up loudly enough.
Well, I think they stood up on the 23rd of June 2016, and I think one day they'll stand up again. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. Let's go to James.
Hello there, Nigel. Yeah, good to see you. I'm the editor of a car magazine. I get asked lots of questions, so I'm going to pass one very important question on to you. The question I'm asked the most is about the 2030 ban for petrol and diesel cars. They want to know, can it be stopped? Can it be avoided? What can we do?
It's unobtainable. It won't happen. And this crackpot idea that we'll reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 80% by 2035, it will not happen. We will not be able to generate enough reliable electricity within the next 10 years to have a fleet made up almost wholly of EVs. I'm not against EVs. I mean, I'm sure you know better than me in terms of performance and everything else. They can be great. But if you want to drive to Edinburgh, you'll break down halfway. So they've a long way to go. I mean, if you're bimbling around town, you know, and you've actually got off-street parking, so you can charge the thing, it's fine. But no, look, this isn't going to happen. And just to remind you why I think I'm right about this, we just had to fire up 2 coal-fired power stations in the last couple of months, otherwise the lights would have gone out. And you can build as many wind turbines off the Norfolk coast as you like. By the way, I don't like any of them, but that's just me. And when the conditions are right, that'll be great. When they're not, it's going to be hopeless. And so I think we just cannot produce enough electricity. Germany have U-turned on this already. The German car industry have U-turned on this. They're going to continue with the internal combustion engine beyond 2035, but with a new e-fuel. And I think I'm all for, I'm sure you are too, I'm all for cleaner fuels, I'm all for engines that do more miles per gallon, but no. 2030, the end of sale of petrol and diesel cars. James, it's for the birds.
Fair enough.
All right. And finally, Andy.
Good evening, Nigel. Good evening. Welcome to Norwich, pride of East Anglia.
I'm very pleased to be here.
If Donald Trump becomes president again, how will he deal with Russia and China?
China.
China.
Well, as we speak, President Macron and the Commission President of the European Union, unelected, Ursula von der Leyen, are in Beijing.
Absolutely.
Bowing down before President Xi, doing it for their own and their nation's own economic interests, regardless of the threats that China poses to us. Donald Trump woke the world up to the threat China posed.
He said it, didn't he? He said it.
He woke the world up to it. Russia, they accused him of colluding with Russia. They accused... I mean, the Russia hoax went on forever, you know, as he says, Russia, Russia, Russia. Actually, you know what? He was tougher on Putin than Angela Merkel was.
Yeah.
And he warned her publicly, stop buying all that gas from Russia. So look, you know, I think Trump's biggest... He had his failings, of course he did. I think Trump's biggest success was his foreign policy, not to mention the Abraham Accords.
Absolutely, yeah. We just need to wake Sleepy Joe up, really, don't we? To get him, wake him.
Look, that Chinese balloon did a figure of 8 over military installations
He was asleep all
in
the time.
America,
He was asleep.
and he didn't shoot it down for 6 days.
No.
The Donald would have blasted it out of the sky within seconds. Andy, thank you. In a moment, we're going to do Talking Pints. I'm going to be joined by Stuart Agnew, retired farmer, retired politician, and a man who was actually in the same class as King Charles at Gordonston. Talking Pints in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
For Talking Pints with a very enthusiastic Norwich audience. And I'm joined by Stuart Agnew, Norwich born and bred, farming family, and, of course, been a politician for 10 years as an MEP. And he was at school with King Charles at Gordonston, so there's a heck of a lot to get through. But, Stuart, welcome.
And tremendous to be here, thank you.
Good, no, delighted to see you. Delighted to see you. Now, Norfolk farming. This was, you know, clearly in the blood, and you've had brothers that have been Norfolk farmers. And what state's Norfolk farming in today?
They have been battered by the 2 events. One is the sudden increase in the price of nitrogen fertiliser, which is a byproduct of something else that stopped being produced. And then, of course, there was the Ukraine war, which, for arable farmers, if they hadn't sold their grain before that war, they saw a doubling in prices. But for livestock farmers who were having to pay that double price, it has been disastrous, really, for pigs and poultry. Norfolk has a huge population of outdoor pigs and, of course, a lot of poultry. I mean, Bernard Matthews and his beautiful turkeys, you know, all that's here. And they struggle to try and get the money they needed from the supermarkets who wanted to keep their prices down because people were experiencing cost of living and they were caught in a terrible vice. And many have gone out.
I'm going to come back to farming, but before you became a farmer, you were packed off to Gordonston and you were put into a class, age 13, with a young Prince Charles. Now, I bet a few here have watched The Crown and have seen this sort of portrayal of this brutal institution. How did you survive, Stuart?
I didn't like it, I have to tell you. But if you watch The Crown, there was, I think, an excerpt there that said he ducked out of a cross-country run. That's rubbish. He didn't. That boy was duty-driven. He never would have done that. And if he had, we'd have been talking about it throughout the rest of the 5 years. He never did that.
So it was pretty grim there, was it, genuinely?
I found it tough, I must say, yes.
And you're pretty tough.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there was morning run in the morning. At 6:45, a bell would ring. The only furniture we had in the dormitories was the bed, the blanket, and we had to have our gym shoes and running shorts. And we had to get up and go for an early morning run. Towards the end of the Christmas term, somebody was allocated to injure themselves on the morning run. And if they did that, there was no more morning run for the rest of term. I drew the short straw because I was at a dormitory where we had to run past the housemaster's flat to join the rest of the lot. And I ran into one of those steel cylindrical dustbins and drew blood and made a huge noise. And, of course, I was a hero for the rest of the term because they catch the morning run.
King Charles, as he now is, you were there with him, I think 4 years you were in the...
5, the same academic.
And a very small class. You got to know him pretty well. What did you make of him as a person?
Oh, I thought that he handled it well. I did, at those days, I did admire him. I think he talks a lot of rubbish now, I have to say, but then... Yeah, I know. But, you know, he could never duck out of anything. He always handed his prep in on time. He was expected to take the lead part in a Shakespeare play. He was expected to sing a solo in the choir.
A lot of pressure.
He was expected to master a musical instrument. He was expected to do well academically, and everything he could do, he did as well as he could. He wasn't sporty, which is a disadvantage in a school like that. But, you know, I give him full marks for really trying hard.
No, that's good to hear. Well, I tell you what, he's going to need a lot of perseverance and strong will, because if I read the front of today's Guardian, and if I go through the Guardian, this is now an outright attack from the left on the institution of monarchy, just 30 days before Charles's coronation. And, you know, they're revealing money the royals have earned, links hundreds of years ago with slavery, and he's going to need a lot of resolve to get through all of this. And I hope and pray that he does, and I believe that he will. And even if, like Stuart, I might disagree with some of the points he makes, I think he's fundamentally a good man.
Oh, yes, he is. He's duty-driven.
Now, Stuart, you survived Gordonston, but you wanted more danger. So off you go to India, and then you finish up in South Africa, Rhodesia, and the events that were taking place down there with that Rhodesian bush war were truly horrific, weren't they?
Yes, and my job there was a soil and water conservation officer with the Ministry of Agriculture, and I was posted up to a town called Karoi, which is just south of the Kariba Dam, and the terrorism was just getting going, and it took the form of landmines being laid in the dirt roads, and if you drove over one of those, you were dead. And we only had a limited number of mine-proof Land Rovers for civil servants like me who worked out in the rural areas, and it was a pecking order. If you had a wife and children, you were top of the list, wife next down, but myself and the livestock advisor, we were both bachelors, and so we didn't get them. And as I was mainly working out on frontier farms, pegging their contour banks, we were going on a lot of dirt roads. The tarmac roads were fine, they didn't dig them up. Yeah. The dirt road, that was where the problems were, so I thought I need a good spotter in the cab with me, and I found an old vehicle number plate and put it up against a tree. I had a staff of 10 or 12, and individually I kept bringing them nearer this number plate. What does it say? What does it say? And the chap who read it first was an old boy who I didn't really expect. I just brought him in not to hurt his feelings. He had milky film on his eyes. He read it. And so he sat next to me as a spotter. The problem was with him, he had terrible body odour. As we were driving along the tarmac road, you could wind the window down. But once we got on the dirt road, all the dust and muck came in.
Maybe he saved your life.
He did, 3 times.
And what was happening down there was truly horrendous. I don't want to dwell on it. Back in farming, you become active. You've always been a man of opinions. You become the Norfolk representative with the National Farmers Union. You mentioned earlier, you know, the problems with costs, the Ukraine war. But I'm looking at what's happening in the Netherlands, where they want to cut the number of livestock, they want to cut CO2, they want to cut nitrates. Where does this leave farming? I mean, you know, we have to go for net zero, Stuart. We have to save the planet.
Well, we don't have to if we can stop it. I mean, we are a democracy, and if the stupidity of net zero can be conveyed to the electorate and exactly what it will mean to them, and in the Netherlands it means drastically reducing farming output. Their very best thing they do is wonderful soil. They do a superb job. Yeah. And what really gets me about this is that they could grow these crops with using less nitrogen and less pesticides if they were allowed to use modern plant breeding methods, gene editing and genetic modification. So it's the Greens who would tell them, oh, you're polluting, you must stop. And then the solution to that, the Greens say, oh, you can't do that. The Green lobby are our enemies.
But you are a global warming sceptic, aren't you?
Absolutely. The planet's warming. My scepticism is the contribution of CO2 to that warming. It's a trivial cause of climate change. It's our solar cycles, the jet streams, the ocean currents, and other things are far more important. And has anyone in here ever heard a weather forecaster saying, ooh, carbon dioxide levels are here, we're going to get such and such a weather? You never hear that, do you? You never hear it. And can I please show you something I've got here?
Briefly.
Right, OK. This is a satellite map of where the carbon dioxide hotspots are. Yep. And they are exclusively over the tropical rainforests. That's where the hotspots are. All the organic matter deteriorating.
Hold it up. Right, OK.
Right.
Yeah.
The bottom map, the top map is where the experts thought it was going to be.
And the point being, Stuart?
The point being, you look at the CO2 levels over India, 1,400 million people burning coal. Look at the CO2 levels over Central Australia, where nobody lives and nobody does anything. They are identical.
All right, well, Stuart, a lot of people disagree with you, but it's interesting. I want to hear it now. Given those strong views, it's no surprise that when you and I met in 1999 that you immediately signed up for UKIP, and you go from being, you know, an active Norfolk farmer, 10 years in the European Parliament. I think you rather enjoyed it.
It was a massive shock to begin with. I didn't know where I was, walking into...
Didn't you turn up on the first day at Eurostar in St Pancras?
Don't tell them, no, come on.
He turns up without a passport.
And what's more, he leaked it to the press.
He turns up without a passport and says, I've got a jolly important meeting in Brussels with Nigel Farage, and they let him on Eurostar.
Yeah, they did,
Yes. Stuart, you're right. I thought the story was so wonderful, I did leak it to the press. Final thoughts, Stuart. Cricket, great love of your life. You're still active in Norfolk cricket.
Yes, I'm the chairman of Castleacre Cricket Club, and we just had a promotion into another league. I'm the scorer as well, and the trouble is I'm not a nerd. I love my book with all the colours. Now I have to use some wretched tablet or something, and I am struggling. So I'm going to go on a course, because the club expect it, because if you use one of these tablets, it's broadcast on the internet. People can find out what's going on
live.
as it's happening.
Yeah.
The worrying thing, though, is this racism in cricket.
I know.
All the captains in Norfolk were brought together. Must be tough on racism, but where does banter end and racism begin?
We debated this with Pat Pocock, former Surrey and England cricketer, on the show on Monday of this week, and you're absolutely right. Stuart Agnew, we could talk for hours. In times gone past, we have talked for hours and possibly had more than half a glass whilst we were doing it. But it's lovely to see you, and it's great to be in your home county of Norfolk for Talking Pints.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Well, we just we can't end, can we, without Bell and Sperling with their latest rendition of Nigel Says. Take it away, boys.
Hamza Yusuf is the leader of the SNP. I think he could be worse than Jimmy Cranky. He won't go far, he didn't insure his car. This lot are almost as funny as Billy Connolly. I tried to book a hotel, but they're all full. The bloke behind the counter said you're not eligible. I've tried the army base, they said that they've got no space. We've heard they're even gonna put them in the Albert Hall. Hey, 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 'cause Nigel says just how it is. It's been a bodge job, and Nigel says just as it is. So Yusuf, shut your goal. Nigel's always on the ball. Nigel says.
I can't even begin to tell you how disgusted I am.
Nigel says.
I am absolutely furious.
Nigel says.
Save our Scampton.
Nigel Farage.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. A fine start to this long weekend. Showers on Thursday, easing to warm sunny spells for Friday, Saturday and into Sunday, but some rain comes along Sunday night and into Easter Monday. But for the time being, weather systems are clearing away. Showers easing on Thursday evening and a ridge of high pressure building across the UK lead us into that fine weekend. So Thursday evening, a few showers remaining into the east, but they disappear eventually. Rain taking a bit longer to clear from Shetland, I think, but even here it does disappear by dawn. A lot of cloud remaining in the North Sea. That will affect the east at times through the weekend. Otherwise, it's lengthy clear spells. A touch of frost to begin things on Friday morning, but actually some mist patches as well. And once the sun gets to work, those mist patches will lift, temperatures will rise, and by the end of the morning, most places are going to be with warm, sunny spells. One exception, the east coast, where there will be some mist and low cloud returning during Friday afternoon. That will keep temperatures held back, 11, 10 Celsius on the North Sea coast. But where we've got the sunny spells elsewhere, 15 or 16 Celsius entirely possible. Some fair weather cloud will bubble up, especially across, say, the hills of Wales, parts of Northern Ireland as well. Otherwise, for most, it's a fine day on Friday and another decent day on Saturday as well. Again, some mist and low cloud into the east coast, and we'll wake up to that on Saturday morning, I think. We'll keep things frost-free here, but a frost likely elsewhere where we've got those lengthy clear spells overnight. Some fog patches first thing once again. However, Saturday is looking like a cracking day. Plenty of sunshine up and down the country. Again, a bit of an exception there for the North Sea coast. Some mist and low cloud at times. Breeze from the North Sea will make it feel cool here. Otherwise, it's looking largely dry, bright and settled through the...
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.